I will call Imran Hussain to move the motion. I will then call the Minister to respond. I remind other members that they may only make a speech with prior permission from the member in charge of the debate and the Minister. There will not be an opportunity for the member in charge to wind up, as is the convention for 30-minute debates. Order. Order. Imran Hussain to move the motion.
Thank you very much, Mr Stewart. I beg to move that this House has considered the rate of statutory sick pay. It's a privilege, of course, to serve under your chairmanship, Mr Stewart. The topic of statutory sick pay is one that has been grappled with by successive governments, with report after report saying we need a fundamental review, root and branch change to a system that is letting workers down every day. But frankly, successive governments have failed to tackle this issue head-on, many proactively avoiding and dodging dealing with this much important issue. And that's why I'm glad that within the first 100 days of a Labour government, we delivered on the pledges and brought a transformative, once-in-a-generation employment rights bill to drag workers' rights into the 21st century. And whilst the Honourable Gentleman for Ellesmere Port and Bromborough, the Minister that brought that bill largely forward, is not here today, can I also put on record my thanks to him. And in a previous role, I did have the pleasure of working alongside him in developing much of that policy that we see today. Policy that has meant that workers in our country today have had their rights bought and made fit for purpose for today. And part of that also actually addressed statutory sick pay. And much welcome changes actually, Mr Stewart, to statutory sick pay. In 2022, a TUC survey found that those earning over £50,000 a year received their full pay when sick, compared to only a third of those earning under £15,000. Around half of all employees across the UK got their full pay, just over a third got statutory sick pay, and 1 in 10 got nothing at all. Most low-paid employees, around 8 million, were in the middle group, reliant on statutory sick pay. For these workers, the measures in the Employment Rights Bill are much welcome. Removing the 3-day waiting periods that workers are eligible for sick pay from day one, removing the lower earnings limit and extending sick pay eligibility to 1.3 million of the lowest paid workers who are currently denied it due to the lower earnings limit of £123, and setting the 80% earnings replacement rate. However, as the TUC, the Safe Sick Pay Coalition and many others have said, we cannot and must not stop here. We must continue to be ambitious in wanting to strengthen workers' rights. I will give way to the Honourable Gentleman.
Shannon.
A critical issue for my constituency in Strangford, and I think probably the Honourable Gentleman as well. There are many small and medium businesses who are at this moment are struggling, let's be honest, with the national insurance contributions rise. And will he agree with me that perhaps when it comes to helping and building upon the legislation that Labour has brought forward to help those, the Minister and perhaps government needs to step in to assist those small and medium businesses to ensure that when they're dealing with the national insurance contributions, they can make sure that the statutory pay can be delivered for their companies and for the small group of employees that they have.
Absolutely, and I agree with the Honourable Gentleman, and he makes a very important point actually, because, and I'll come on to address some of this more substantially later on in my address, but he will also understand this, that actually the benefits to small and medium-sized businesses of a healthier workforce, a workforce where we actually limit presenteeism, we increase productivity, is absolutely massive in the long run. And it's one of the huge issues that we currently face, where people who are too sick are being forced, because of the lack of support, are being forced to go to work which actually is not good for them and is not good for the business as well. But I do take
friend give way.
Of course I will.
I'm grateful to my honourable friend giving way, and I want to congratulate him on securing this important debate and on running an important campaign about increasing statutory sick pay so it's a real sick pay that people can rely upon. My honourable friend talks in detail about the very welcome advances made in the government's recent Employment Rights Act in relation to sick pay. But he agreed with me that it's really concerning that as part of those proposals, actually 300,000 amongst the poorest workers could actually lose out. And does he think that the government needs to look at this again?
I thank my honourable friend, and he as ever makes a very important and pertinent point. And if he bears with me, I will address that point later in my contribution today. And it's actually one of 2 points I want to address today. And as honourable members will know, I tabled 2 amendments to the Employment Rights Bill to strengthen the policies around statutory sick pay. The first one of my amendments sought to bring statutory sick pay into line with the national living wage so that no full-time worker is forced to live in poverty while unwell. The second amendment aimed to guarantee that no worker would be worse off under the new system regardless of their earnings, something that the honourable gentleman for Leeds East has made reference to and which I will come on to. If I could firstly turn, Mr Stewart, to the rate of statutory sick pay. For far too long, our statutory sick pay system has been one of inadequacy and one that has failed workers while at their most vulnerable. The pandemic laid bare just how broken the system is. Over a third of workers rely on statutory sick pay, and at a rate of £118.75 a week, it is nothing more than a cruel joke, a poverty wage that leaves workers in financial insecurity instead of being able to rest, recover and take the time they need to return to work fully fit. The current rate makes up a mere 16.5% of the average weekly wage in the UK, far behind our European counterparts, to name some in Iceland, Norway and Luxembourg, where workers are entitled to up to 100% of their pay during sick leave. However, it is not just our international counterparts we are trailing far behind. When statutory sick pay was introduced in the 80s, even then it was equivalent to 35% of the average weekly wage, double what workers can expect today. Mr Stewart, no other financial responsibility in a worker's life is slashed by 83%. You know, when somebody falls ill, their bills don't suddenly go down, their council tax suddenly doesn't go down, their electricity bill doesn't go down, their mortgage doesn't go down, the groceries go down. So it begs the question, why does statutory sick pay remain such a paltry sum, forcing people to choose between their health and their financial survival? We know that keeping the rate as it is pushes too many workers into the workplace when they're simply not well enough. It entrenches presenteeism, harming public health, reducing productivity and contributing to longer-term sickness and burnout for workers, making them drop out of the workforce entirely. There is a clear consensus now that the rate of statutory sick pay must increase, and it must increase in line with the national living wage. This is a call echoed by unions like Unite and Unison, organisations like the Child Poverty Action Group, Scope, Mind and Disability Rights UK, and it is supported by the majority of the British public. So I urge the Minister to not to ignore the swell of public opinion or the needs of workers across the UK and share the next steps the government is taking to fairly recompense workers during periods of illness. This is not the only change urgently needed to our sick pay system. Despite the government's best efforts, those on the lowest incomes who do the hard, vital work in our economy will be financially penalised for falling ill. These are workers who are the backbone of our economy as cleaners, carers, drivers and retail workers, the very people who can least afford it. Low-paid workers, disproportionately women, young people and disabled workers will still face the hardest burden. The reality is that the new 80% earnings replacement rate does extend sick pay to those who were previously excluded, which is very welcome. It also now risks creating a system where some workers will be worse off. And I'm sure, you know, the Minister's present and I've worked with him for many years, and I'm sure that was not the intention of the government. But under the new government rules, the reality remains 80%, more than 300,000 workers earning between £123 and £146 a week could see their sick pay cut, something my honourable friend for Leeds East referred to earlier. While before, a worker earning £123 per week was entitled to an earnings replacement of 95%, comparable to statutory maternity leave, for example. Now a worker earning £124 for 3 days of work a week would receive 80%, £99.22 per week from the first day of illness. Under the old rules, they would have been entitled to the flat rate of £118.75 from the 4th day of illness. So under the new rules, they would be worse off after 5 weeks. The fact that it takes 5 weeks to become worse off should not be seen as a mitigating factor, because this isn't just about numbers. The new rules will directly affect workers with chronic illnesses, those recovering from serious surgery, those undergoing cancer treatment. In short, the people who can least afford to take a financial hit at the most vulnerable time of their life. These are workers who rely on every penny they earn, and they must not be left behind under these new rules. This is the bare minimum working people should expect. So I ask the Minister to outline how the government will be supporting workers with chronic illnesses who do fall sick, especially those who currently work and rely on disability benefits like PIP to be able to dress, wash and get out and about in their daily lives. These workers, frankly, have been left terrified by the recent announcements on the change to PIP eligibility criteria, and now they could see also statutory sick pay, if they were put in that place, also reduced. So I urge the government to think again about making the most vulnerable in our society pay for the economic instability that frankly is not of their making. Mr Stewart, this is not just an economic issue, but a moral one. We can and must go further to support workers at their most vulnerable times. The government has the power to ensure that every worker... I will do.
I thank the honourable member for giving way. In my Horsham constituency office, I employ a member of staff who has ME. Unfortunately, we can be very flexible with their working hours. However, under current law, by which statutory sick pay is based on days worked, not hours worked, an ME sufferer could easily miss out altogether on sick pay. So would the honourable member agree that the government should legislate to ensure that all employers are granted fair access to sick pay?
Absolutely, absolutely, and I think that's the crux. And like I said before, the government has gone a considerable way, and I acknowledge that. You know, the Employment Rights Bill has made significant changes that would allow millions of people to benefit from statutory sick pay where they weren't before. But the journey must not end there, and he is absolutely right, because there are many people who are still missing out. And actually 300,000 people, like I said, that actually will significantly miss out. As I said, Mr Stewart, in coming to my closing submissions, this is not just an economic issue, and it shouldn't be viewed as one. It's a moral one. The government has the power to ensure that every worker, whether they work in an office, a hospital, a factory, or the front line, can take the time they need to recover without fear of financial ruin. They also have the power to ensure that no worker receives less under the new rules than they would have done before, especially those with long-term illnesses. And let me be clear, we cannot allow this opportunity to pass without ensuring that every worker benefits from the changes we have introduced. This is our chance to build a fairer society, one that treats working people with the dignity and the respect they deserve. And I hope the Minister, again, who I have much respect and regard for, understands that I come at this from a place of actually supporting. He is somebody who has a long track record in understanding these issues, and this is our opportunity where we must go further, because that is the only way we will address this. So I urge him, will he commit to reviewing the SSP so that workers no longer have to rely on poverty pay? when they're sick, will he today commit to reviewing the impact of the new changes, specifically the 300,000 people who will be worse off under the new 80% replacement plan rate? Because that bit, the second bit in particular, I would urge the Minister to bring back to the House to see the impact on those 300,000 people, because I do not believe that that is what the government intended for 1 minute, but I do not think equally that we can just ignore that. And will he finally outline exactly what steps he is taking to make sure that those who have the most severe illnesses or those who find themselves sick or in recovery for longer than 5 weeks do not find themselves unfairly punished? The Minister knows that if we fail here today, we will fail an entire generation of workers.
Stephen Timms.
Thank you, Mr Stewart. I'm delighted to be serving under your chairmanship this afternoon. And I do want to congratulate my honourable friends on securing this debate and in the thoughtful way that he set out his case. And he's absolutely right to highlight the fact that this issue has been dodged for a long time. There were proposals brought forward in 2019 for reform of statutory sick pay. They were paused for the pandemic and they were never ever brought back. But my honourable friend and I agree that the government inherited a statutory sick pay system which fosters economic insecurity at work, particularly for the lowest earners. And the pandemic exposed just how precarious work and life is for people on low incomes, with a lot of people forced to choose between health, including the health of others, and financial hardship, an impossible position which many people found themselves in. The topic that my honourable friend has focused on in particular has been the rate of statutory sick pay, but I do just want to highlight the actions the government is taking to implement the plan to make work pay, plan that he's referred to and supported, ensuring the safety net of sick pay is available to those who need it. And I think the change will meet exactly the point that the honourable member for Horsham raised in his intervention. Because insecure, low-paid, irregular work has been the lot of far too many people for far too long. The Employment Rights Bill, which had its second reading in the other place just before Easter, and I echo my honourable friend's tribute to the Minister, the member for Ellesmere Port and Bromborough. That bill is turning the tide with the biggest upgrade to workers' rights in a generation, boosting living standards, improving our economic growth prospects thanks to urgently needed reforms to our economy. And through the bill, we are, as my honourable friend has set out, extending statutory sick pay to those earning below the lower earnings limit, and also removing the waiting period, making it payable from the first rather than the fourth day of sickness absence. And those 2 points in particular, I think, will address the concern raised by the honourable member for Horsham, particularly removing the waiting period. But these are very important steps to strengthen statutory sick pay, and I'm glad to hear the strong support from my honourable friend and others for those changes. I've heard as well his calls for further reform of the system, including the call to increase the flat rate. The rate of statutory sick pay is designed to balance providing a basic level of support for employees when they're unable to work due to sickness with helping to manage the costs to employers. And it is very important, I think, to get that balance right. And that's where the debate is likely to focus. The changes through the Employment Rights Bill mean up to 1.3 million low-paid employees will now be entitled to statutory sick pay, and all eligible employees will be paid from the first day of sickness absence. That will certainly benefit, the second point will benefit many millions of employees. But as part of removing the lower earnings limit, we committed to a fair earnings replacement. We consulted on the percentage rate last year, and the conclusion from that exercise was that the new rate, 80% of normal weekly earnings or the flat rate, whichever is the lower, does strike the right balance between providing financial security to employees while limiting additional costs to employers. And this is important because, as set out in the regulatory impact assessment, the reforms will obviously increase the aggregate amount of sick pay employees receive, estimated increase of £420 million per year. At an individual level, removing the waiting period means that all employees will receive at least £60 extra at the start of their sickness absence. If they are somebody who works just 2 days per week, they will get £150 extra compared to the current system through the removal of the waiting period. And removing that has the added advantage of making a phased return to work easier. That's always been one of the aims for reforming statutory sick pay, to make it easier for people to return to work in a phased way, which can be very effective in helping people make it possible for them to return from a period of absence and stay in work, reducing the flow into economic inactivity, reducing the additional costs to business. It also means an employee who earns just below the lower earnings limit could now be entitled to up to £100 compared to nothing under the current system. My honourable friend set out in his remarks potential benefits from going further for disabled people, people with health impairments, and the concerns he set out are among the reasons we set up the Keep Britain Working Independent Review, being undertaken by Sir Charlie Mayfield, who used to run John Lewis, to consider what employers can do in order better to support disabled people, people with health impairments, to work, and what the government can do to promote those improved practices on the part of employers. After conducting an initial discovery, as it was called, into the underlying issues, the review has launched a call to all stakeholders to engage with the early review findings and to input views, including via a survey launched on gov.uk. And I would encourage everyone who's interested in today's debate to look at the questions in the survey and to respond to it as well. My honourable friend suggested that the system ought to be aligned more closely with the national living wage, and he referred to the amendment he tabled to the Employment Rights Bill at report stage to that effect. The difficulty here is that that would increase costs on business by something like £1.3 billion per year on top of the changes that we're already making through the bill, with no mechanism for employers to reclaim those costs. And given the quite substantial differences in how national living wage and statutory sick pay are calculated, there'd also need to be big changes to the statutory sick pay system, and there need to be further consultation with businesses and employees about that. It would also significantly impact the work and scope of the Low Pay Commission. But the big issue here is the additional cost to business of going ahead with a proposal along the lines that he suggests, and for that reason the government has decided not to do that. Sometimes in debates about this, and my honourable friend did touch on this, the models for sick pay arrangements in other countries are highlighted, and they do provide useful and informative comparison. And I think it's important to look at those. It is important also to recognise that sick pay arrangements sit within the context of different social security systems, different economies, different employment obligations and protections in the different countries. And so simply comparing sick pay arrangements can be a bit misleading. Of course, many employers do already go beyond their statutory obligations for paying sick pay by offering employees occupational or contractual sick pay. Around 60% of employees report being eligible for such arrangements from their own employer during sickness absence. But some people will require further support during a period of sickness absence. They may need additional financial support. They may be able to claim more help through the social security system, in particular universal credit. My honourable friend mentioned PIP as well, depending on the circumstances that they are in. And we are determined that that support will continue to be available. My honourable friend expressed concern that some employees might receive less under the new system than under the current one, a point also raised by my honourable friend, the member for Leeds East. By removing the waiting period, all employees will be entitled to more statutory sick pay for the first 3 weeks. My honourable friend talked about 5 weeks, but clearly with a significant payment up front, there'll be a period during which people will have received more. But those who are absences in the first 3 weeks do represent 87% of all sickness absences, according to the Department's 2023 employee survey. So the number who are out of work on statutory sick pay for the longer period, beyond the one that my honourable friend referred to, will be quite small. I'm certainly not claiming there won't be anybody, but it will be quite a small number. The changes we're bringing forward will help to stop people being forced to work when they are unwell. They'll also support very effectively the lowest paid employees, who will always receive the highest income replacement rate of 80%, having not been supported in the past. Now, an alternative approach to removing the lower earnings limit has been suggested. My honourable friend touched on this. But we think that would create a pretty unfair system, because there would be some employees receiving a greater earnings replacement rate, up to 100%, than those people earning less than them. And in an extreme case, 1 penny in average weekly earnings, potentially making nearly a £24 a week difference in entitlement. And I don't think that would be the right thing to do, and I think my honourable friend would recognise that that isn't a very satisfactory state of affairs either. And I haven't seen a model that would guarantee everybody was better off that doesn't have that particular problem in it. But the department will publish, I hope later this week, a fact sheet on gov.uk which addresses these concerns in more detail. There's been discussion about whether there should be a rebate to employers to help them with the increased cost of statutory sick pay. There's been a rebate system in the past, but it was rather complicated, it was expensive to administer, wasn't always taken up by small employers, and it didn't encourage employers to support their employees. By contrast, under the new system, employers do stand to benefit from increased productivity amongst their employees, offsetting the additional cost, which is reckoned to be about £15 per employee per year. So, Mr Stewart, I want again to congratulate and thank my honourable friend for securing this debate. I welcome his thoughtful engagement on the important matters he's raised, not just in this debate, but in the Chamber report stage of the Employment Rights Bill, as he said, and directly, I recall, with the Prime Minister too. He is raising important points in a constructive and thoughtful way. As the changes to SSP being taken forward through the Employment Rights Bill move closer to implementation, we will continue working closely with employees, with trade unions and with businesses to deliver a system that's fair, supportive and effective for all. And we are going to pick up his point. We are going to monitor the impact of these measures to strengthen statutory sick pay, monitor as well how SSP is used by employers and how effectively it supports employees. I'm grateful for the opportunity to set out the government's position. I'm sure we'll be talking about it again.
Order. The sitting is suspended until 4:30 p.m.